I want to talk about persistence because, just to do a little bit of math here, you spent all of your 20s and most of your 30s attempting to write novels, failing. You came to Hollywood, tried to write screenplays. Your writing career didn't even really get going until you were...
Yeah, it was 52 when Legend of Bagger Vance got published.
So your hit came at 52. Even just being able to, like, it sounds like pay rent didn't happen until around 40.
Yeah.
That is decades of persistence. Like, talk to me about what the mindset was during that time. Like, how did you keep going for that many years?
I just couldn't do anything else and be happy. From time to time, I took jobs in advertising back in New York, because you could make some money. But at the end of the day, I would be so depressed that I had to go home and try to write something for real. And the trying to write real stuff was what kind of kept me sane. So I just really knew there was no other thing for me to do. And then, like, when I got to Hollywood, then I was actually making money.
Yeah.
I could pay the rent, and I felt like I was learning, that I was on the path. So even though I hadn't succeeded in any real sense, I felt like, okay, I'm in graduate school or whatever it is, and I'm working towards it. So, it sounds hard, that long period of time when you look at it from the outside, but it really wasn't. I just didn't have any other choice, and it was fun along the way.
It's funny because I imagine you get some of this too. Like, I often get emails from 22-year-olds, saying, "Oh, I've been trying to do this for 3 years and, it's too late. Like, I'm too old. It's never going to work." And of course I'm 40, so I chuckle. I'm like, so old. I wonder what your perspective on people's, the power to keep going through adversity and doing it for the right reasons, I suppose, right? Like doing it because you writing the things you genuinely love, not because it's going to get you a book deal, but because it's what keeps you sane.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you're a dancer, your body's breaking, but you want to dance, right? That's the thing. If you're a singer, if you're a musician, it's in your fingers. You want to do it.
Yeah.
I think it has to be a real calling, and not you're doing it for fame or to get. And I don't know today if anybody could really have a sort of a career like I did, where you did. It took so long. You know? I don't know how people do it today. But I guess it's true. It's life. That's the way it is.
You do. I mean, it does happen. I do think it happens more in writing than other art forms.
A long wind up.
Like a long build up over a long period. Like, I think E.L. James, who the 50 Shades of Grey woman, I think she was in her 50s or 60s
is that right?
when she wrote it, and it was her first book. You do hear stories, but it is like what stands out to me with your answer to that is it that it just sounds like you would have done it anyway.
Yeah, I would have done it anyway. It wasn't for the money. I certainly wasn't making any money.
Yeah.
I read a thing about when Cormac McCarthy died. I love to read obituaries.
Yeah.
And because it's a great sort of biography of a person, that apparently I don't know if this happens anymore, but he had written, like, before he broke through with, I guess, All the Pretty Horses was his kind of breakthrough. He had written like 4 or 5 like really good novels that didn't sell for shit.
Yeah.
But apparently he had either an agent or a publisher that kind of protected him and threw enough money at him to kind of keep him going. And it was like, this was like a 20-year deal before he finally broke through. So, but I'm not so sure if maybe that happens more than we realize today.
Yeah.
Where somebody is brought along by another mentor or somebody that has a little bit of power.
You popularized this concept of the resistance with a capital R. Generally, it's the resistance that we feel towards not just creatively expressing ourselves, but like positive changes in our lives. I'm curious. So you, according to my count, this might be wrong, you have done 5 Hollywood screenplays, 10 novels, 11 nonfiction books. I'm curious, when has resistance shown up the most for you in your career? And how did you fight through it?
Oh, wow. What a question. I mean, resistance is sort of omnipresent. I mean, the worst that it ever was for me was at the beginning when I first sat down and tried to write something where resistance just completely defeated me. You know, my own self-sabotage. I couldn't finish anything. I had a hell of a hard time starting anything. And resistance, is a real diabolical, ever-changing, protean, intelligent force that will fake. Can we use a profanity here?
Of course,
that
this
will
is the
fake
fuck podcast.
Fuck out of you. I've been doing this now for almost 50 years.
Yeah,
and it never goes away. It never diminishes. It's always subtle, always nuanced, always devious. So I face it, all the way through a project, beginning, middle, end, and in between.
Can you give me an example of how it showed up earlier in your career, like maybe a story of a way you sabotaged yourself? And then I'd be curious, how has it shown up recently with, say, your most recent book or one of your recent books?
All right, I'll plunge in right to the deep end right away. The first book that I tried to write, I was like 22 or 23 years old. I had quit a job in advertising. I was married. I was a young guy with a young wife in New York City. And I wrote for like 2 years and got right close to the end. A great place when resistance will strike, right? You're afraid to put something out there to be. So the bottom line was I cheated on my wife in such a way that she would find out about it. In other words, I really acted out in psychological terms to just blow up my life and my wife's life and the book so that I wouldn't have to face that. So that was pure resistance. I had no concept that there was such a thing, but it was this negative force of self-sabotage to stop, me from finishing what I was trying to do.
I'm glad you bring up the wife thing because going back through the War of Art, which at this point I think I've gone through 3 or 4 times. It's every 5 years or so I'll go back and kind of go through it again. It's like a nice reminder.
I do too.
Yeah. But I'm glad you bring that up because when I was kind of going back through it, to me, the concept of the resistance, it can apply so well in personal relationships.
Yeah, definitely.
Family relationships, romantic relationships. I think there's something, there's definitely, it's very much tied to like a sense of vulnerability. Like writing a novel is such a vulnerable, or any book, any creative work is such a vulnerable process. Like you are putting such a deep and personal part of yourself out into the world. And that's fucking terrifying. And I think in the same way, a marriage or a relationship or, having intimacy with somebody, it's very similar in that it's terrifying because you're making yourself vulnerable. You're exposing like a very deep personal part of yourself and making it possible to be hurt.
Yes.
And so the resistance is like, it's like the protective shield that shows up,
I mean, my sort of rule of thumb of that is that resistance will strike anytime you're trying to move from a lower level to a higher level. Politically, morally, you're trying to take a stand on something like that, or in terms of giving to the world or risking anything. That's when it'll strike. It isn't necessarily only creative stuff, you know. So, like you say, it is. You're getting vulnerable. You're gonna dare to stand out from the crowd, say something that'll put you. And in a relationship too, when you have that hard conversation, then resistance will really tend to sabotage that and make you act out in some crazy way. Yeah. So you don't have to have that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I know how that goes. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. This was a clip from the Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck podcast. We release podcasts weekly on YouTube and everywhere where you can get podcasts. So be sure to subscribe, follow us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you like listening to stuff, because we're going to have a lot more stuff to listen to. Check it out.